I wanted to take a couple of moments of your time before we start the first breakout session, because normally we start these things obviously with an opening session, but given how we wanted to make sure people had time to come in, we thought we'll just jump right into it already. My name is Brandon Ona. If you guys don't know who I am, I'm the Business Services Director for the Office of Workforce Development at TCSG. And our office as a whole, for those of you that don't know, although most of you do, administers WIO title and funding, as well as some other critical workforce development services for businesses, one of which is our services, one of which is apprenticeships and the registered apprenticeship model. So in putting together, the vast majority of content for this week, we wanted to make sure that it was as comprehensive as we possibly could make it, and it was also relevant to the work that we're doing as business services professionals or individuals that are at that nexus point between the workforce development system and industry, or anything external. So with that, I wanted to again welcome you for coming. I know you guys are taking time out of your days, and especially now during the time of COVID, it's very busy. There's plenty probably on your plate back at the office. So we appreciate you taking time to meet with us. And the second thing I wanted to know, while a lot of these are the sessions here are business services, this is the business services room. You guys are more than welcome to go to some of the other sessions. In order for us to make our work successful on the business services front, it's by being in the same room. So I'm always not happy to see you guys. Or if you guys like to.
But you're already an investor.
Yes. Sorry. But with that, turn it over to John. Oh, and actually, let's do this first. We have a really great team here. Actually, I think everyone from the business services and apprenticeship team is here. So you guys can put some names to the faces. John Lyle Moore is our business services specialist. He'll introduce the apprenticeship team in just a moment. This is Marcus Weathersby, Alex Burton, Tammy Roper is somebody else on our apprenticeships team. She couldn't make it with us this week. And then our newest addition to the business service team is Bianca Howard, who is sitting back there. So yeah, feel free to say hi.
Thank you, Brandon. So just making sure we're all in the right room, this is Apprenticeships 101. So this presentation, obviously, registered apprenticeships, everyone's favorite topic. And they're an excellent training model, that can transform minimal skilled individuals into highly skilled individuals with higher performing employees. However, these robust training programs can be very complex that both understand and communicate to the workforce and industry. So attending this session, it is hosted by the OWD apprenticeship team, and we're going to learn about the basics of the program and who's involved, how it's funded, and when they can be utilized. So as Brendan said, my name is John Lyle Moore. I'm a business services specialist here at WorkSource, Georgia. And today our wonderful speakers are Mr. Marcus Weathersby, who is our apprenticeship manager. We have Mr. Winston Olawale, who is our apprenticeship specialist. And last but not least, we have Ms. Alexandra Brown, who is our apprenticeship administrative specialist at WorkSource, Georgia. And without further ado, I will go ahead. Oh, one more thing. If you would like to know more about each speaker, please visit our UBA app where you can see each individual's whole bio. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Marcus.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Again, my name is Marcus Weathersby. I'm the apprenticeship manager for the Office of Workforce Development and Technical College System of Georgia. It's a pleasure to see you all. There's some of you in person. I've seen a few faces on virtual meetings, so we're thrilled to have you here today. Again, the title of the session is Apprenticeship 101. We will give you what we consider a very high level overview of apprenticeships. No need to go into some of the gory details that we have to deal with, but really what me and my team try to do in working with our technical colleges and workforce partners around the state, and as well as employers, is to really try to make apprenticeships understandable. There's a lot of details that comes out of U.S. Department of Labor that really are not that can scare some people off. But again, our role is to try to make it as simple as possible, give you an idea of some clue words and scenarios that you can keep in mind and think, okay, this sounds like it might be an apprenticeship opportunity. So with that being said, yes, about registered apprenticeship. So just want to know, does anybody have a definition of apprenticeship? At least your understanding of the definition of a registered apprenticeship? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Okay.
Pay while you learn.
Oh, wait a minute, okay.
Pay while you learn on the job while you're in school. That's not crazy.
It's not fancy, but it's just fairly accurate. Getting paid while you pay to earn, while you go to school. Yeah, that's true. So I will cover that, and part of this, my portion of this presentation broke it down in what I like to call the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why of registered apprenticeship. So first, going back to the definition, this is the definition that our office likes to use. Registered Apprenticeship Program is a robust and comprehensive training model that develops minimally skilled individuals into high-skilled talent. And as you can see at the bottom, these are 5 required components of any registered apprenticeship program anywhere in the country. Again, combining the job, which is a full-time position, different than maybe some OJT programs some of you are familiar with, or internships. When it comes to apprenticeship, it is a full-time job as it relates to U.S. Department of Labor, 40 hours a week. 50 weeks a year for 2,000 hours is the general parameter. There's a combination of classroom learning. This can be with one of our technical college partners, another educational institution, or even possibly a community organization, a nonprofit group that is doing so that can provide some of that classroom learning. One of the components of that on-the-job training, different apprenticeships have different time periods depending on the occupation, but there is a minimum requirement that the apprentice gets at least 1 pay increase during the term. We'll discuss all these things a little bit more as we go along, but we generally encourage employers to have multiple pay increases just because of how competitive the labor market is. At the end of the day, the apprentice receives a national credential issued by the United States Department of Labor. And this is in addition to any other certifications, degrees, diplomas that they might achieve during the time. But these are the 5 primary components of the United States Registered Apprenticeship Program. So the primary participants, I won't go through and read everything verbatim. I'll let y'all see that. But I would like to highlight a couple of items. Again, the U.S. Department of Labor is the parent of all registered apprenticeships. They establish the foundations for what the apprentices are expected to learn on the job based on interviews, consultations with industry experts for the different occupations, whether it's electrician, carpentry, welding, industrial maintenance mechanic. That all starts with the U.S. Department of Labor. Some primary components, and I'll need to want to update my graphics, but if you think about a triangle, there's components of registered apprenticeship that will fit into a triangle. At one point of the triangle is the employer. Registered apprenticeship is an employer-centric program. It is designed to meet employer needs and help accommodate their labor force challenges. The education providers, again, for our examples, the technical colleges are the primary resource partner to our office. And I'll jump down to the sponsors. Sponsors are the administrator, collecting the paperwork, doing the data reporting to the Department of Labor. Our office, as well as all 22 technical colleges, are approved apprenticeship sponsors for U.S. Department of Labor. So they are able to handle all that paperwork stuff for their employer partners. And then the apprentices. So employer, educate, OJL, the RTI provider, and sponsor. Those are the 3 points of the triangle, if you can envision that. And then within that triangle are the apprentices. So each of those 3 partners surrounds the apprentice to support them on their journey. Any initial questions about, we'll have questions at the end, but just want to make sure this is clear for everyone. Okay. The when and where of the W's. So the employer, again, an employer-centric program. There's a lot of challenges and options like when it comes to the employer. And it depends on what type of classroom training schedule that they want to have or they're able to accommodate. Some employers want and need those apprentices to be on their fixed work schedule. When the business is open and operating, and in those cases, there might be less flexibility for the classroom side of the training. Or they can have a situation where they're a little more flexible than they were. Maybe they're 20-hour a day facility. 20-hour per day facility. It's 24-hour a day facility. Sometimes they can be more flexible working with their education provider. But again, they need to accommodate and collaborate with that training provider, the classroom provider. There is a required mentor, one-to-one, so the employer does need to be big enough and robust enough to dedicate an employee to be that mentor while the apprentice is on the job site. And again, the RTI provider. One of the guidelines from DOL is that classroom training needs to have at least 144 contact hours per year of the apprenticeship. Now, 144 hours, this is not credit hours, 3 hours a semester. This is pure contact hours. And when you break it down, as it says here, that's as little as 3 hours per week that they are getting that classroom support supplementing their work schedule. So not necessarily a daunting task when you factor that in. So, and again, as I mentioned, at the end of the training, in addition to the USDOL certification, the employer may also want to support, an apprentice finally receiving their associate's degree or one of these TCCs, technical certificate of credit. Getting all these acronyms mixed up. So moving forward, and then the why. These are some, if you look through this list, these are some things that you can keep in mind. If you're having a conversation with an employer about an opportunity in your area, some things that, might trigger you to think maybe an apprenticeship, high skilled, position. This is not necessarily a cashier, in a grocery store. These are folks that need some intensive training that might take multiple years. The general apprenticeship, the shortest apprenticeship is 1 year. There are some that can go as long as 7 years. Most of what we see here in Georgia is between 1 and 4 years. A couple of healthcare occupations and IT can be as short as 1 year, but the majority that we see are again up to 4 years. But again, difficulty attracting diverse talent and just overall competitive advantages. One of the things that I'll tell employers when I'm meeting with them when they want to consider an apprenticeship, yes, you take a chance, bringing on somebody that does not have the skills and trait, skills and abilities that you want, but you're taking a chance, you're trusting them to come in and train, and you're building a little loyalty in the process. So, and you're getting a competitive advantage, taking a chance on them when other employers won't. Now, I'll turn the next section over to Winston to explain some of the benefits of apprenticeship. And looking forward to answering questions at the end. So. Hello, everyone.
So, my partner in crime couldn't make it, Tamara Roper, but I'm going to try and represent her a little bit here today. So, what are the benefits of apprenticeships? Well, so one is the benefit for the employer. Typically, talk about stronger employee retention. What does that say exactly? We found out that statistically, 70% of college students tend to leave within the first 3 years of their first job and change employers. We found out that with apprentices, they have a sort of a 90% retention rate. What does that mean exactly? What that translates to is the apprentice tends to stay 5 years or longer with the same employer. That's what that means. Opportunity to retain and maintain institutional knowledge. So you find out, or what we've discovered, a lot of the workforce. Director Brandon did the introduction to the back there, told me a story about some employee went to see where the youngest person on the job had 30 years of experience. So the ability to retain and gain institutional knowledge is, once you provide those apprenticeship opportunities to your workforce, that knowledge doesn't get to walk out the door. It's maintained and retained by the new apprentices. Integrating new advanced technology. So what will happen is a lot of employers will have new or proprietary tech or new tech that you may acquire. And so the employer has the opportunity to go to the technical college and so collaborate with them so that the apprentice actually learns what that new tech is prior to coming to work. So they're learning the new tech in the RTI, which is the college learning, and then they're coming to work and that knowledge is going to be reinforced on the job. That's one of the opportunities for the opportunity to integrate and the new and advanced tech. Upskilling existing workers. So the incumbent workers, the guys who exist, can also be part of the apprenticeship process. You know, so you can upskill those guys, put them in apprenticeships, and learn the skill, and it helps cut down on HR having to go out shopping and poaching, skill from other companies. So you have your incumbent workers, it makes them feel, I guess, cared for and loved, and then they're quote unquote a proven entity because you know them, they've worked there a long time, so they're a proven resource. And so when you upskill them, so you have these guys who now have increased, are more productive, right? And also you more or less create a pool for yourself as an employer where you can pull your new supervisors, your managers from. So that's one of the great things about upskilling the existing workforce. So you're, high skilled talent crafted for the company. So of course, I think that basically speaks for itself. One of the byproducts of an apprenticeship is you are going to get a skill. You will be highly skilled. You will get upskilled. Okay, so like I said, there are many benefits. I talked about the one for the employer, now benefits for the apprentice. One of the great things about apprenticeship is the individual, the apprentice, gets paid. So they're employed and they get paid at the beginning of their apprenticeship. There's somebody who's a new job, they're also learning, they're earning money, they're taking money home, they're supporting themselves, they're supporting families. So it's a win-win for them. Yes, the guaranteed rates of Registered Program. So basically, one of the things that's written to the apprenticeship model is you have to at least give one raise in the course of the apprenticeship. One raise. However, what I really encourage employers to do or recommend is, as the person gets upskilled at certain stages, to give them an increase in pay. Because you want to remain competitive, right? Keep them at the end of the process. So, as they get upskilled, maybe they get a TCC at a certain stage, increase that pay scale, and then they get TCC at another stage, increase that pay scale. But the only thing that is stipulated in the model is that they have at least one pay increase in the period of the apprenticeship. Pathways. So, why it's considered, I would consider the pathway, the benefit for an apprentice is also they're going to college, school getting the RTI, that's what classroom instruction is, the related technical instruction. So they're getting that. And then they're getting to work in the OJL, which is the job learning. So this makes it a sort of a structured, sort of comprehensive learning program. So that's why it's such a pathway to career. You know, it's structured and DOL, and you know, we can also help that to provide a structure for this process. Accessible training model for most job seekers. Reason it's accessible is USDOL doesn't really set an education standard for apprenticeship. There's no education requirement they stipulate. What they do ask however is the individual be at least 16 years or older. 16 or older. But the employer is the one who drives apprenticeship in the first place, can stipulate for that entry requirement for them it should be. So the employer, you know, constantly driving this process. All right. That, of course, is your national certificate of completion when you're done. This is, you get this, and it gives you some portability for the apprentice. Bring it, show it. It tells the employer they've gone through some kind of structured program, and so that's basically what it was. Certificate. Okay, so we're talking about benefits again. I told you multiple benefits. So for those workforce development folks, apprenticeships foster partnerships. So it could be either a group of employers that get together. It could be a cooperative of some sort. It could be an association that get together that sort of run a registered apprenticeship. Right? So it's great about, you know, fostering relationships. Provides the defined path to high school patients. So I talked about how it's structured. It's a structured program. You're getting your RTI at one point, which is the college part of it. At the same time, you're working simultaneously on the job with the OJL, so you're learning on the job, right? As I said earlier, with your mentor on the job site. So again, we help. It's a structured program. There's the templates that help structure that. So it's, you know, at the end of the program, you're definitely going to get somebody who's highly skilled. And it facilitates diversity, equity, and inclusion because of the entry requirements. Right? There are no sort of initial entry barriers in an apprentice. So it sort of opens up the door really for anybody. All it requires is somebody who's willing to commit to the apprenticeship and sort of go through the process and succeeds. That's basically what an apprenticeship is. So it helps facilitate that diversity. You can't, you know, there's no group that's a better fit or best fit. It works for men just as well as it works for women, you know. And things to see, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. All that matters is commitment on the part of the individual and the desire to succeed. That's it. So, yes, like Marcus says, we're going to try and hopefully go through the material and then give you folks an opportunity to ask questions at the end. At this point, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Mr. Brown.
You would say, hi everybody. So now that we've discussed apprenticeships, let's put what we know into action. So how will we start a registered apprenticeship? The first step in doing that is to assess if an apprenticeship is a good fit for the employer. You have to start with a conversation with the employer. Not every workforce need is going to be a good fit. Sometimes you may want to explore other options. While apprenticeship is a really great training model, sometimes it doesn't quite work in practice. Some questions to ask the employer would be, is this a highly skilled occupation? Does it require advanced training? Is this something that we can use to upskill existing workforce? workforce? And is the company ready to commit and invest in this program? There are some necessary training costs that the employer may need to pay for, and are the right partners there? Which there are required partners of the apprenticeship. There's three main ones. Obviously, the employer. It is an employer-driven training model. The training provider, which, as Marcus mentioned previously, is more often than not going to be the technical college. They provide the related technical instruction. And the apprenticeship sponsor, which can be a number of different entities. However, it's more often than not also going to be the technical college. All 22 of them are apprenticeship sponsors. And we also have recommended partners in the apprenticeship. There's several entities that might assist you in engaging outreach activities. For example, if you wanted to target formerly incarcerated individuals, you may want to reach out to a community-based organization. If you want to target youth apprenticeship, K-12 school systems would be a great place to start and bring it into that conversation. Step 3 is to identify the work process and the related technical instruction outline. This is a roadmap, basically explaining the apprenticeship process. There's two parts to this. The first part is the on-the-job aspect, which is what they learn on the job with the employer. TCSG has access to, there's several different places you can obtain a work process. A great resource to visit is apprenticeship.gov. There are several templates for occupations that give you a good starting point for what that apprenticeship will look like. And the RTI portion of it is what they will learn in the classroom. So this is going to be with the training provider, which more often than not is going to be the college. And as Marcus also mentioned, this roughly equates to, the minimum is going to roughly equate to about 2,000 on-the-job learning hours, which is about 1 year for every, which also goes with 144 contact hours per year. And the last step, step 4, is to get registered. So when the employer, the college, TCSG create this work process, and it's agreed upon what the student will be learning on the job with their employer and in the classroom, to put that together and submit it to TCSG. Final acceptance of that work process does go to USDOL. They typically confirm the program structure, make sure everything is compliant, and finally, the employer and the RTI provider submit what's called an employer acceptance agreement. And this is just a couple-page document, basically an agreement between the TCSG, the college, and the employer, agreeing to the outline of the work process and what the apprentice will be undergoing as an apprentice. And that's pretty much it. You're ready to go out there and start recruiting.
So with that, the floor is open for questions. Everybody has apprenticeship down pat, right? Not yet. Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit more about the 200-hour content and how any money exchange hands?
100. So it's 2,000 for on-the-job learning per year and 144 for the classroom portion.
Okay, so that was 2,080 hours total, 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not the exact science, but that's why they figured that the 2,000 is a good enough benchmark to say, okay, this is a full-time job for a year.
And then money, how does the money exchange hands? Does money exchange?
Well, between what parties?
Between workforce and employer?
Well, I don't know if Brandon could speak more to that part, but as far as the apprentice and the employer, they are a normal W-2 employee. So if the employer offers benefits to non-apprentice employees, they would be expected to offer benefits to the apprentice. So the apprentice is treated and onboarded just as a regular employee.
So that's a really good question. And one of the things that in a previous presentation that we talked about was kind of myths around it. And apprenticeship, the way we like to talk about it, to make it clear, is it's a training model in and of itself. When you're looking at RIO, and I think we have a lot of RIO folks in the room, it's not a separate funding or a program for funding, right? It's not like an OJT or an IMT. And so we're working on putting together guidance, and we're here to help kind of put together some of those funded programs in a way that fits that apprenticeship model. But generally speaking, there isn't an apprenticeship funding stream. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important to know is that, and we'll have another session after this with a couple of our very active apprenticeship sponsors and partners out there in the state to talk about how they go about funding. But it is an investment, something that needs to be articulated. One other thing I would add to that, and this is, this team does a really good job at making sure that we offer this is, or we have the opportunity to offer this is apprenticeship funding from USDL. So USDL does have separate discretionary for apprenticeships. You all most likely are able to apply for them yourselves. As a state, we always try to make a concerted effort to apply at the state level, but those are usually direct funds to the apprenticeship. One thing I would note, which is maybe something to keep in mind, is despite the funding streams that we have, generally speaking, wages outside of maybe OJT or something that can't be funded. That's the goal. Outside of the classroom, also.
But they would be enrolled in WLE?
They could be. Yeah, they don't have to be. Yeah, they don't have to be. And moving forward, I think an apprenticeship based on how the current leadership of the Department of Labor is promoting it and how we'd like to promote it as well. We hope that individuals that are WHEO eligible are entering in these apprenticeships. But to your point, no, they don't have to be. And that's something that I think will be discussed in the next session is, what kind of individuals can be. To Winston's point earlier, it's pretty much anything, as long as you're over the age of 16.
Yes, ma'am.
Being from the youth section, I want to know if you can speak a little bit on the requirement of pre-apprenticeship into apprenticeship.
Great question. So I'll start by trying to explain what a pre-apprenticeship is. And so there are different versions of a pre-apprenticeship. When it comes to USDOL, what they consider a quality pre-apprenticeship program, it's a program that gives an introduction to an occupation for an individual. A lot of times these are 2 to 3 month programs, often where someone is going through a day in the life, shadowing an employee at a company, getting some basic on-the-job training. This is what your life looked like, coming to the job, and giving them an understanding of what they would be signing up for. Now, in order to have that considered a high-quality pre-apprenticeship program by DOL, there would need to be an actual registered apprenticeship available for that person to go into. So, okay, I went through this day in the life, 3 months in the life, in my example, and I'm ready to go into to be a welder or to be in the trades industry. Okay, well now there is an actual apprenticeship program at, throw a dart, pick a technical college here in the state that's available. Sometimes it may look like an internship. That's one comparison that I'll throw out that a lot of people can maybe resonate with. But that's generally what for the pre-apprenticeship. I am having conversations with pre-apprenticeship starting in high school. And sometimes they can be paid if the employer wants to pay individuals, for that opportunity, again, as a recruiting tool. Does that answer your question?
Because if there any, does the state have any guidance in regards to like how much it should cost?
The answer is no.
And there's no cap or anything.
We don't have, we don't have guidance from state level. There is a T-goal or 10 on pre-apprenticeships. That we'd be happy to send it. Forward send you guys.
Yeah, in a lot of situations, if you compare it to sort of like a semester, in a college course, there's an instructor, that's going through this, doing the training, and oftentimes they will expect to be paid. And so who's going to pay? At least sometimes, as Brandon mentioned, sometimes DOL has some discretionary funds. to pay for pre-apprenticeships. Our office does not have any right now. But we've had conversations where multiple employers have come together. If they are all interested in the same occupation, they have this need, they'll pool their funds and support a pre-apprenticeship training program. So there's definitely multiple ways for that to happen. I think I saw Brittany's hand. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Question. So just want to make sure I understand. So company A can do a pre-apprenticeship and then that apprentice can go to company B for the actual apprenticeship? It could be two different companies, or does it have to be within the same?
Well, technically your scenario can happen. I'm not sure why company A would give up that individual to company B, but technically it could happen, yes. Yeah, in general, if a company is supporting a pre-apprenticeship program, they're looking to identify their own labor force. And since the topic of pre-apprenticeship has come up, it's definitely something that is encouraged for companies to consider. Even if it's not a quality pre-apprenticeship by DOL standards, some type of introduction training program before they make that full HR commitment. And you save a lot of headache and heartache. You got one right in the back there. Yes.
Can you give us an example of an apprenticeship program that's working right now and give us an idea of what the day in life will look like?
Well, we're going to have some conversations this afternoon about that. We have multiple around the state. I will say by far, industrial maintenance mechanic is the most popular and most active apprenticeship here in the state of Georgia. Alex, any particular other occupations that you can speak to that are highly active forward? Alex has more insights on all our individual programs.
Yeah, so one of our largest, in terms of numbers, would be our healthcare apprenticeship through Atlanta Technical College. They have hundreds of people involved in that program. It's a relatively new program, just started last year, I believe. And I believe also Georgia Piedmont and Savannah. So it's a CNA to PCT partnership. But industrial maintenance mechanic is by far like the most popular. Welding, there's some HVAC programs, I would say. EMTs also.
Yeah, right now, I believe 20 of our 22 colleges around the state all have active apprenticeship programs. And the other two, we're working to get them in line pretty quickly. And I have one more question here, sir, and then I'll come to you. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so they received the national certification for apprenticeship completion.
Correct.
So do they also receive an industry certification, or does that serve the purpose?
That's it. Yes, that serves that same purpose.
So with CNA, so say with the CNA, for example. So the apprenticeship is the next, so we get a CNA national certification in addition to the apprenticeship national certification. Or are they the same?
Well, the USDOL certification, that's the primary national.
Okay. So whatever industry they're in, they're actually being certified in that industry.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
According to the register.
Okay.
And I do want to touch on that point. It doesn't necessarily fall, but just by the nature of how we are here in Georgia compared to some of the other states, with our technical colleges or with our training providers, oftentimes when an apprenticeship leaves, of course they leave with the national credential, but they almost have a handful of credentials and certifications that they need. And that's one of the values of the apprenticeship program, because it gives them the it has that pathway, and Marcus and what you're talking about, where you can accrue. I mean, I think you'll hear from Dr. Clark a little later, but even in the pre-apprenticeship, I mean, the credentials are watching.
Yes, sir.
I work with a number of manufacturers around the Augusta, Georgia area in South Carolina. And a lot of them are interested in developing a program called Certified Production Technician, which is basically a machine operator producing the product. And so they manufacture at different skill levels, but they're looking at a program that would bring the individual, like senior in high school that's finishing up, bringing them in, letting them work half a day, learning the technology of operating equipment. And then when they graduate, they're certified, they're already a trained technician for the facility, and they like that idea. So a lot of interest in that from all the plants I call.
Yes, now, is that something where they are looking, they're in their own customized model for their company?
That's correct.
Yes, and we do see that. And we realize, sometimes when there are companies that prefer to use their own model versus the USDOL model. And, we're not here to say, oh, no, your model is horrible. You have to go with what USDOL provides. Well, the counter to that is it limits that the employee from that portability, that Winston spoke about. They're not receiving a national certified credential, which, in turn allows them to receive higher pay and also make them more marketable. So it's almost, I don't want it to sound cruel, but it's almost doing the employee a disservice by not supporting them for that higher level.
What we have in that area is one of the larger collections of plastic industries in the state, automotive and other plastics. The technology from plant changes, even though the products may be similar. There's more robotics in some areas and other biotechnology and other facilities. So there's a diversity across all the facilities. So in order for them to benefit right now, they have to center on what technology or what skills are needed in their facility. And then that's kind of like the foundation that they go on elsewhere.
Well, okay, thank you for bringing up that point. So one of the items that Alex mentioned is the work process. So USDOL gives us a template for the work process. Those work processes are allowed to have adjustments and some customizations to fit that employer's needs and preferences. It has up to 25% adjustment that's allowed. So it is absolutely possible for an employer to adopt one of these work process templates, pull out a couple of things that really aren't relevant, add in their own, and still accomplish the same goal. So this is not a guarantee that every apprentice can go to any company and be able to jump in. No matter where they move, there'll always be some training nuances that come along with it. So yes, DOL does recognize that and has implemented that adjustability to accommodate employers with those concerns.
So I've got a two-part question. The first part is, so if I have a company that is interested, it's just a one location company and they have one person that they want to put in, can they apply to be a registered DOL? I mean, a registered apprentice through USDOL? Is there a minimum to do that?
Yes, they can apply for a single employee. The challenge can be will come when the RTI provider might be limited in their capacity.
Gotcha.
And that's because generally the employers are picking up the tab for that classroom training. And so if it's, what we call that customizable non-credit training program, for example, I'm not sure what the overall costs are, it depends on the occupation. But it's certainly, if you have to pay a teacher, an instructor, certainly the economies of scale kick in if you have 8 individuals in a program supplementing the instructor cost versus 1.
But they're not limited if they choose to do that.
That's correct.
So the other question was, does it have to be training at a college or university or PCSG, or can it be an in-house training?
Very good question. No, it does not have to be through one of the technical colleges. It can be an in-house training program. If it is in-house training, it switches up the process a little bit, things that Alex was mentioning as far as how that work process is scheduled, reviewing and approving that in-house training program, because if they're trying to take the place of an approved training provider, they would have to be approved and get what's called the eligible training provider.
So they do have to be on
ETP.
the. Okay.
Yes.
If four-wheeler.
Okay, so if they're not gonna be real funded, then they don't.
And it sounds like you moved to either the Cuba.
Yeah, sorry, I might have complicated that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, if it's real funding, yeah, HTPL, obviously. But one of the things that Marcus was kind of alluded to was it would have to go, and this is where it gets a little complicated. So USUL obviously has different sub-agencies. The office that oversees apprenticeships is called the Office of Apprenticeship, and ETA is separate. So that apprenticeship program that's being started is going to have to get approval from the Office of Apprenticeship, separate from us. We, as a TCSU, we've made inroads with OA, is what we call that, to help expedite the process or ease it a bit, but if it's going outside the TCSU, it's going to have to go through that process, which can be a bit more cumbersome. So, is that what we were looking to?
Sounds good.
I was trying to, you said this was an overarching 101, but I was.
Yes.
I appreciate you.
Sure.
There's a lot of information we could inundate you with, but we're trying to keep it.
Right.
Yeah, and I will say, one of the joys about working in this position is there are no, there's no two apprenticeships that are just like. I mean, we've seen situations where we have the same employer working with two of our colleges because this employer has multiple training sites. They have different needs at these different sites. So while they have a boilerplate, they still make adjustments to their own training models. And one of the things I just want to reemphasize about apprenticeships, it's not always a new, green individual coming into these positions. As Winston mentioned, incumbent workers, upskilling those individuals who are already hired. And one of the benefits for those individuals is, let's say there's the 3-year industrial maintenance mechanic program. Well, if an employer has somebody that they want to get some advanced training support for, well, they can use what's called that prior on-the-job learning credit. And they can take that 3 years and maybe shorten it to as little as 1.5 years, to give them prior credit. So not everybody has to start from zero for these apprenticeship programs. Again, another way to try to make it more appealing and more attractive to bring folks in.
Could you touch on the minimum lengths of apprenticeship in terms of months and years, and what's more realistic in terms of how long this program lasts?
Sure. To reiterate, 1 year is the minimum. Again, with some prior credit, somebody could come in for an abbreviated training. Some of the healthcare occupations, again, 1 year, some technology, cyber IT programs, 1 year. But again, those multiple year programs, there's a lot of variation. There are different structures for an apprenticeship. So it does not necessarily have to be somebody starting work on day one and also doing the classroom. They could what we call the front load, the RTI side. So they could go on campus, have a situation where they're just going to school for a few months and getting that basic foundation of classroom learning before they start the on-the-job portion. We still consider that the start of the apprenticeship. Now, I will tell you, sometimes in that model, in order to entice the apprentice to take that approach, the employers might pay them while they're going to school for that classroom time. Now,
That's not a requirement.
it is not a requirement. But again, it's an example of how creative employers are becoming to attract this talent and to build their labor force. And Brandon mentioned, it's an investment. on their part. You know, again, we're not able to offer guaranteed, you know, funding streams or, oh yeah, we have money to pay for the apprenticeship. No, the employer is making the investment in multiple ways. Let's see. Yeah. I mean, again, the structures can be different, you know, based on the employer's schedule, their training partner schedule. You know, it's not always in classroom. It could be online courses that they take, and that counts for those contact hours if there goes some online curriculum. So a lot of different variations, but those primary components: full-time employee, classroom partner, and then the sponsor taking care of the administrator. Those three pieces, those three corners of the triangle, you know, and each sort of supporting the apprentice. I have one question here, and then I'll come back to you.
I'm still hung up on the money. Okay, so because let me give you a scenario. So if I go into an employer and I'm doing business services with them, and I come to this assessment that wow, this would be a good company to do an apprenticeship with. And so I'm trying to come up in my mind, what is it that I'm going to be able to hook this employer into having this conversation with me about apprenticeship? So if a person is real eligible, can we pay for the training part of it? Provided they're not employed yet, that they will be going into this employment side.
So you could, and there's a number of ways you could do that on the legal side. The OJT is one of the ones if you're paying the wages. Incumbent worker training covers the costs. ITAs are often used as well. So they'll be employed, you know.
So the key would be if you're real eligible, but if not, it's a whole different process.
Sure, yeah. But we all have funding a lot. That's one thing I try to stress a lot, especially when talking to some folks in the wheel system. We all funding alone can't pay for the entire cost of the function. And I think that as business services folks when we go to companies, just making that distinction, if there will be, you know, some costs that are going to have to take on. Or, you know, look for other funding streams. A lot of times, we see a lot of really good examples of this throughout our colleges where it's using, you know, WIO funds and it's using the discretionary DOL grants that are out there. It's using, you know, sometimes state funding vehicles like the whole career. So it's mixing it together, and that's what it goes back to when we talk about facilitating partnerships. That is one way.
So another thing you can share with the employer is if they have an aging workforce. This will help their recruiting. You know, so they don't have to go out poaching people, they can recruit people that they can upskill. So that's
Institutional, that's a good point for me, but institutional knowledge transfer.
correct.
And I'll also just like to add on, just thinking about the current state of the economy and the labor force. One of the things our office, you know, had to adjust to as some grants expired and DOL funding, you know, has been a little more limited. You know, we don't want to sell apprenticeships based on the money and the financial strength. You know, if I'm talking to an employer, I'll say, well, you're looking to hire, right? So you already have this financial impact carved out in your budget. Your competition is looking to hire these individuals. And so it might be worthwhile for you to just consider doing this anyway, making this initial investment to train this individual up to accommodate your staffing needs, as opposed to, well, you know, I'm not going to do it if I don't have the money. Well, you're looking to hire anyway, and you're going to hire without these grant dollars. So, you know, that's a way to try to help them keep it in perspective.
That's a good simulation.
And you're helping recruit for that position that they're looking to hire for.
Yes.
You're helping recruit there.
Absolutely. And had a question here, Mary?
Yes, so, this is kind of like, focused on like the youth population. But if the youth were to do a pre-apprenticeship, would they need to immediately go into an apprenticeship program? Or could you like do a combination of a pre-apprenticeship and maybe a work experience?
So to answer your first question, no, they are not required to go into an apprenticeship program.
Okay.
at the end, they might realize, no, this isn't a good fit for me. And so that's a great purpose for the pre-apprenticeship in that alone. Now, if they do decide, maybe sometime later, that sounds good. I think has sit back, think about it, and realize they're not making the kind of money that they wanted, that there's other option. The employer might be willing to give that prior credit for something that they learned on the job, just to help them out a little bit, as far as shortening that time period. So it's not an obligation to jump into a registered program.
Their national credential carries a lot of weight. And we really should be promoting more of our youth who are coming from communities that lack of resources and really put them on a career path of ending in that credential, because they can take that anywhere. I think we do a disservice when we're not really pushing. I'm really an advocate for this program, and not only for the on-the-job training and the actual skills training that takes place in the educational institution, but also, combined that credential. It's really preparing them to be committed.
That's absolutely, I agree. I was just given a time warning from the back. But again, just to follow up on that, one of the challenges when it comes to recruiting these younger individuals, as you can imagine, they're not too concerned about that credential. So what do we do to get their attention? Well, let's show them how quickly their money can increase as they're getting these certifications and as they're graduating their skills. Now we get their attention. So, I use the KYA principle, know your audience. And so talking to the employer is different than talking to the student, and talking to the college who's trying to recruit these individuals. So, it's a combination of all these positives and just recognizing where those hot buttons are. For who you're meeting with.
Do you find that the employers tend to ask the apprentices to sign on a commitment letter?
Oh, good question. We've had that. You want to take the opportunity or? Okay. It's an option. It's an option, and we've had conversations about that. Now, DOL does not have a requirement, we really don't get involved in that aspect, but employers are using it, whether it's a tuition reimbursement, contract, or we'll buy you a laptop, or, whatever the situation is for that particular job and occupation. Sometimes employment contracts are reasonable to consider, I should say. I don't know if you've had any experience, Brandon, with it.
No. No. I mean, I would say, they wanted to stay around, but the nice thing about the commitment, so I think with some of our training programs, if we train, outside of apprentice, right? If we train somebody, the employer's like, well, how can I make sure that I can hire that person to train? With this, it's a big job on day one, so they're all true. And that's one of the clarifications I want to make, and I, not necessarily clarification, but things that I think we should encourage, is that these are actually, that yes, they're full-time as a requirement, but that they're on pay, right? That they are W-2. There's nothing that stipulates that, the W-2 part, but encouraging that. Because it makes a difference.
I think what is worried is that they're going to lose the trust. So, what we tell them sometimes is to put in contingency plans for them to make maintaining that employment, first of all, contingent on completing the program, and then there will be a contingency that they stay X amount of years also, or they will have to pay back X amount of money. So all that sort of makes the employer feel better.
So I was just giving my final minute, so one more question and then we'll need to wrap it up.
It is just for clarification purposes. I want to make sure I heard OJT, IWT do not or can be ran concurrent with the apprenticeship.
They can, yeah, and that's one of the things that USUL has tried tried their best at doing, is making sure that you can use these programs out. When you say concurrently, at the same time, no, but one could follow the other. If that makes sense.
That's fine.
Well, because from a OJT standpoint, that would be a new employee. And then the IWT, they'd have to be there for at least 6 months. That we can't subvert.
But registered apprenticeship with OJT.
Oh, yes, yeah, because apprenticeship is a model. It's just it's a coding at that point in the GS. Yeah. So. But and we've actually, so John Lyle, and actually, we take it tomorrow, which was previously as well. They work on toolkits. And so for IWT, OJT, and customized training, and in there is specific language on, connecting registered apprenticeships to those types of programs. And those are on the website.
Is there ever a resource?
Well, again, thank you all for joining us this morning. Hopefully it was informative and engaging, and I think I saw some wheels turning, so that means we did okay. So, thank you.